Welcome into another episode of Betting the Pitch. I am your host, the real underscore G Warner. Whether you're on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. On Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review, or Spotify, same. Please leave a 5-star review. I appreciate you watching. We're going to go through, or listening, we're going to go through the Champions League only for this episode. Going to make it a little bit more brief as it is 10 o'clock already here local time. And I figured I want to get right into it, get through Europa League on a separate podcast coming up, maybe touch on the Conference League a little bit. Can't say a lot of big names are in that tournament at this point, but maybe some are coming into the competition now. For now, though, we're going through Champions League because I think that's what everyone cares about. It's Monday night here in the U.S., and you might have seen on Twitter today, I just started a Patreon. It's a little bit different than what I've been offering at pregame.com and at a much more affordable price. So if you're into that, my plan is really to get on there as time permits, but hopefully every night with kind of an update on leans that I have for the next day across all sports, hoping for a lot for college basketball coming up as we have March Madness. And of course, a lot of conference tournaments this week, March Madness next, but then also baseball's coming up to get you through the summer. Plus plenty of soccer still going for a bunch more weeks because of that World Cup break right in the middle of the season. Thanks for supporting. And please, if you're also on Twitter or StreamYard, the real underscore G Warner, I appreciate you following me there. And anytime you want to get in touch with me, that's probably the best place. Slide some DMs, send me some notifications, try to check those as frequently as possible. So get in there, and without further ado, we'll start with Benfica hosting Bruges. First leg, it went to Benfica, 2-0 victory in Belgium. So now Benfica gets the return leg. Second legs are really going to be a lot more wide open, I think, than the first legs. I think the Champions League went 4 or 0-4-0. So all unders in terms of over and under 0 and 4. And that kind of speaks to how few goals there were in this competition. The second round was a little bit more, like there were a few more goals, but still not many. The nice part, though, as we get to second legs, there's a lot more drama involved. People know what they need to advance. And we got one of those situations here where Benfica have a 2-0 aggregate advantage. No longer do road goals matter in UEFA competitions. So that's a big deal. All Bruges need is a 2-goal victory to send this to extra time. And their road goal and extra time won't count for double. So that's also meaningful. Whereas 1.5 goals or whatever you call it. But this is probably the most lukewarm of the matchups. Benfica, very fortunate to draw a Belgian side who is great in Champions League group play, but it's been a long time since that's been happening. And currently, Benfica 1.25 goal favorite with all the juice right now. Over-unders 2 3/4, also very juiced. Looks like numbers are going to climb to potentially Benfica minus 1.5 goals and also over 3 by the time this kicks off. And these are two teams that really don't have great offenses. I think Benfica out of La Liga Portugal is a lot better than I think they get credit for, because the Portuguese league is not really looked on as favorably as I think it should be. Bruges from Belgium, hard to say that is a really great league. And it was a really incredible performance for them to win their group. But I think it was deserved. They played really well. The problem is that group stage play was months and months ago now. So a lot has changed, and a pretty tough 2-0 loss in the first leg puts them a little bit under the cosh here. So Bruges are a 1.5 goal underdog, which is a pretty big number, especially when they need to win by 2 goals to force extra time, 3 goals to get through without extra time. Problem is, a lot of these times, these numbers are not necessarily built on need, which I do like when numbers and point spreads are impacted by whether a team needs a win or not, because I feel like a lot of times teams that need wins don't get them, yet they're priced like they should get them. And that's usually a nice place to make some money. In this case, now Bruges go on the road to Lisboa or Lisbon, Portugal, and they have to go and really kind of change the style they want to play. Bruges certainly weren't a sit back and defend at all costs team in group play. That went really well for them. But they, I think, ultimately in the knockout rounds of the Champions League, that's how they want to play. So this is a very different scenario for them. And unfortunately, I think that's going to cause some problems. So if you're backing Bruges here, getting that 1.25 right now, or that 1.5 goals, you're going to hope that they don't go all out and try to score a ton of goals. The problem is, based on their 2-0 deficit, they need to go out all out and score a ton of goals to flip this all around. I think what you see from Bruges is a more aggressive approach than they're used to. And ultimately, if they fall behind 1-0, 3-0 is not really that different than 2-0. I think they just get more aggressive. And unfortunately, that then makes that 1.25 or 1.5 closing line look a lot less enticing, I think, if you're backing the underdog. In terms of how the match went, the first leg, 2 goals, Joao Mario from the penalty spot in the 51st minute, David Neres in the 88th minute with a big goal late, which I think might have put the tie out of reach, unfortunately, for Bruges. There might be some suspensions, easy for me to say, but I don't have that in front of me. And these matches, unfortunately, they space out Champions League so much. It's been so long since this match happened. But when you look at Bruges, I think really what the most important thing to talk about is styles in this round. And I feel like the style that Bruges want to play does not fit very well here based on their deficit. So what are they going to do? They're going to probably try to get that first goal by, I mean, not shocking to say that aloud, but unfortunately with a 2-goal deficit, they still need to push even when they get that first goal. Let's say they do take a 1-0 lead. Unfortunately, 1-1, then they're back to square one and have to keep pushing. And whatever time has elapsed, unfortunately, they can't get back from that, or can't put it back into that hourglass, can't put the ketchup back into the bottle. So unfortunately, it gets worse and worse the longer that Bruges don't get back to even. At 2-0, I think they go back to playing as defensively as possible and obviously trying to win still and not go to extra time. But I think they're going to more than call themselves lucky to get to an extra time from this deficit here. The problem, I just don't know necessarily that they get that first goal. And if they don't get the first goal, they open up incredibly. The Komodo is more than open. And right now, based on the 3-way money line for Bruges to win in regulation, they're getting more than 7-1, almost 8-1 odds to win the match just in regulation. So very low likelihood that they force extra time, very low likelihood that they advance, whether in extra time or in regular time. But Benfica, I think, will play a little bit more defensively than most teams would in this situation, because that's kind of their makeup. So 2 defensive teams that don't necessarily want to go forward a ton, but in this case, Benfica get to play the way they want to play, whereas Bruges have to be a lot more aggressive than they plan to be. And that's an issue if you're backing Bruges, for sure. I think I lean to Bruges, anyone who listens to this podcast knows that I'm an underdog player. So Bruges, of course, are interesting to me, especially as they climb above that 1.25 number to 1.5, where a single goal loss, you still win a full bet. I don't know that's necessarily going to be a big concern for me, but certainly line shopping is the best way to be as profitable in sports betting as possible. But I think ultimately Benfica are going to be in really, if they win 1-0 or they win by a single goal, they'll be more than happy celebrating as they move on to the next round. I think that's a great spot to be in to back Bruges. Certainly there are some scary situations where Bruges probably send their goalkeeper forward very early, almost empty net style, like you would see in American hockey, or just, I guess, hockey all across the world. Don't mean to make everything about the US of A. I know people in other countries really don't like that. But I think from where I sit in this one, I lean to Bruges. When I look at the total, I think the 3 is very important for me, because I do want to have that push on Bruges, on the total over under of 3. The problem is Bruges is going to be pushing forward, and I feel like that might mean that we see a lot more goals than you normally would expect, because they have to play out of character. I think at 2.75, I am going to skip it. I think at 3, I'm not really guaranteed to play it by any means. But that's the way I lean, both to Bruges and the under. I think I like Bruges getting that 1.25 or 1.5 a lot more than the total. Next on the list is we'll go to Chelsea hosting Borussia Dortmund. An incredible first matchup that somehow went Dortmund's way, and Borussia won 1-0 on a home goal from Karim Adeyemi, who I believe is out injured for a long time now. So 1-0 Dortmund in aggregate, as they then go on the road to Stamford Bridge and have to face a pretty raucous Chelsea crowd, which I think is one of the best in all of England. Chelsea are currently a half a goal favorite, a little bit more of the juice right now. Over under is 2.5, juice to the over. And this one actually has a 2 advanced number. Currently Dortmund a minus 140 favorite, Chelsea plus 115. And I can get into that a little bit further. And I've been tracking the odds and the movement of that such, which might be interesting to talk about a little bit later. So in terms of strategy, I guess I'll recap the first match. Remember this well, because I did back Chelsea on the road as a quarter goal underdog. And I thought they outplayed Dortmund from start to finish. They had one really bad counterattacking goal that they conceded, based being up for a corner kick or a set piece. And unfortunately, things went wrong. And when things went wrong, Karim Adeyemi, who's one of the fastest players in the world, sprinted down the other end, had a great finish. And I think it was one of his first goals, if not his first ever for Dortmund. What a great time to get one. Unfortunately, not for me. But that one goal advantage certainly is probably not, it's the minimum I think you want as a home team in Champions League, but and certainly Dortmund will take it, but I think they were a little disappointed that they should have done better than that. And what I think is going to happen here is another similar situation. Borussia Dortmund go on the road and they probably play as conservatively as possible. Not something you'd normally expect from the Schwarz-Gelben or black and gold, black and yellow. But I think that's the way they do it. I think they know that they are an inferior team. Just look at the squad values from Chelsea versus Dortmund. I'm not going to look it up as we do it, but I'm pretty confident that Chelsea is maybe double the value of Dortmund, even though Dortmund are, I think, very highly valued based on the young players that they are going to eventually sell on. So Chelsea, on the other hand, they are going to try to get a goal similar to Bruges here. They're going to try to get a goal as quickly as possible. I think they're going to be fairly aggressive and might leave themselves open a little bit, especially for that counterattack after it happened in the first leg. I don't know that they didn't respect Borussia Dortmund enough. And of course, having been to that stadium this season, I mean, you should definitely, you should have a lot of respect just for how much they pack into that stadium. I think 82 or so thousand when I was there for the Schalke 04 match, but Champions League, I'm sure, draws similar. But for this matchup, I think Chelsea are going to have to, they have to come out. They can't take a draw here. That would have been a good result in the first leg. I do think Dortmund taking a draw here, getting through, is a perfect result for them. So I think they're going to be a lot more conservative. Problem is, and I've unfortunately run into this before, is if you back Borussia Dortmund getting a half of a goal, I think they will still be a conservative team if they fall behind 1-0 and it's late in the match. And unfortunately, if you take that half of a goal, you are a loser, even though Dortmund will be moving on to extra time to face Chelsea and try to change that 1-1 scoreline. That's not a great feeling. I think generally, especially if you're taking a half a goal underdog, you want someone to send their keeper forward and go all out for it, try to get that point in a regular league match or what have you. Unfortunately, there's a lot of big time sirens going off about bad beats here. Not necessarily if they fell behind 1-0 or are losing by a single goal, not guaranteed to be a bad beat, but certainly not one you want to feel like the situation doesn't really fit your bet whatsoever. So that's concerning. And I think if you like Borussia Dortmund, I think you got to expect them to score a counterattacking goal, because I think it's going to be hard to see a goalless draw here at Stamford Bridge. Over under 2.5. I do think that Dortmund will, like I said, still be conservative, even if they do fall behind, which I think does matter a fair amount. And I think it's going to make Chelsea a little bit more conservative as well, for being worried about the counterattack because they saw it and they lost the match on it in the first leg. But I do think that even if Chelsea take a lead, certainly they'll be pushing for a second goal to try to win the match at home. But I do think there might be some conservative energy from the Chelsea side as well, knowing that the counterattack is what cost them the first leg. And also, I think that they will feel very confident they can win either in extra time by scoring a goal or in penalty shootout at home because they have a big crowd behind them. That does make me feel like the under is also something that I like a lot more here than the total, than the side. And I think that actually fits fairly well to what Dortmund do plan to kind of to use as a strategy. I still do like, I mean, I'm not going to back Chelsea as a half a goal favorite. We can talk now about, I guess, how the teams are running. So Dortmund played, and good on the Bundesliga for putting a Friday match out there. They played Red Bull Leipzig. They took a 2-0 lead and then held on for dear life, got a 2-1 miraculous victory considering one of their new central defenders from Sporting Club Freiburg ended up saving a goal off the line with his shoulder of all things. On a great shot from Timo Werner, a former Chelsea man. But Dortmund were able to get that Friday match, won it at home, and then really were in great shape to get extra rest compared to Chelsea, who had to play Saturday morning in the onslaught of fixtures, not even in the early one, which I think, I mean, if anyone in the Premier League was intelligent, they would be putting their teams in as much or as well rested of a situation as possible. Hasn't hurt them in European competitions lately, but I think it could at some point. And Chelsea got a 1-0 victory. Was it deserved? I mean, maybe a corner kick, scoring a single goal against Leeds, who are fighting relegation and really have no goal scoring to their abilities whatsoever. Not that impressed, I must say, but it was enough to at least get a little bit of the monkey off of Graham Potter's back, though I think he's still very much in danger. And an exit here would not really be great for his job security, I'll put it that way. That I think will make potentially, and soccer and all sports in general, but I feel like soccer specifically, or football as Europeans call it, is really a lot about confidence and feeling like you are in a better position than you were last time. And that, unfortunately, if you're not in that type of situation, it gets worse and worse. You get further into your head. You're trying to put the ball in the top corner instead of just putting it on net. Or on the goal, or hitting the target, and unfortunately makes it harder to score and harder to score, and then the snowball ends up turning into an avalanche. In this kind of case with Chelsea, I feel like one simple goal from Fofana, of all people, a central defender, on a corner kick doesn't solve their issues, but I do think that chips away some of the outer layer of their confidence issues, and that's important. Dortmund took a ton of cards in that first leg. I'm not sure if there's suspensions for this one. That's something we'll obviously look into before we get closer to betting these stuff. And of course, I feel like I strongly advocate waiting to see lineups, because there can be some big changes that can throw the numbers, at least the goal spreads off quite a bit. And you wouldn't want to take this half of a goal on Dortmund if it moves to 3/4 or even +1. I doubt it'll move to that number and move that much, but it's something to certainly think of. As for, I guess, this matchup, kind of as I said, Chelsea are going to push forward for that first goal, and I think it turns very conservative after that. So that 2.5, under 2.5 is very interesting. The last thing I was going to go over was the 2 advanced number. Dortmund currently at -140, Chelsea +115. And I'll just give you an idea of kind of where the juice has moved ever since I started tracking it. So Dortmund I have as high as a +155 underdog, despite opening up at home, which I feel like moving forward, and honestly something to look forward to in a lot of these other two-legged ties, because there's going to be 2 advanced numbers that come out. It's not a terrible idea to speculate on the home team that's opening up as an underdog. A draw probably puts them in not great position to advance, but ultimately a home win is huge. Flip the line and you can pretty much buy out at plus money if you're into that sort of thing. Hedging, I believe, is for gardeners, but currently, and I guess the first number that I saw was Dortmund +155, Chelsea -190. It fell all the way down to 125 on Dortmund. So the market was certainly backing Dortmund, I think, with that reasoning at home. Good place to start. With Chelsea as low as -155. And now here the line is flipped based on Dortmund only needing a draw to get through. I don't necessarily think that I believe in Chelsea to score enough goals that I want to back them as an underdog. Sure, you could argue there's some value in it. I just don't know necessarily that I feel good enough about it. And I don't really trust the Dortmund defense, which I guess advocating an under 2.5 on Dortmund does certainly concern me quite a bit, saying it out loud. But I feel like their defense has improved, and Chelsea aren't exactly a team that I'm very concerned about scoring a bunch. And with kind of the strategy talk we went earlier, I feel like there's a lot pointing to under there. Moving to Wednesday, and this will be the last day I cover on this podcast. We're already, I think, going pretty in depth, but still plenty to come. So stick around. I'll make an ultimate best bet end of show per usual. Tottenham currently, they won. Excuse me. I lost my page, of course. We'll get right back there, but I don't want to say anything wrong. Yeah, Tottenham did lose the first leg in Milan, 1-0. And unfortunately, that puts them in a pretty tough spot now. At home, certainly helpful, but certainly not the best way to go into a tie, needing to avenge a deficit. In terms of how that match went, Brahim Diaz really early, 7 minutes into the match, took the lead on a pretty good goal. And then Tottenham did what Tottenham have been doing, and that's really not scoring a lot of goals and not really looking great. Current number right now is Tottenham a half a goal favorite at home right now. Over under is 2.5, juice to the under pretty significantly. As my phone rings and I look to try to put it on do not disturb like a true pro without anyone noticing. So Tottenham a half a goal underdog or half a goal favorite at home. A little more juice on the underdog AC Milan. Over unders 2.5, juice to the under very heavily, potentially falling to 2.25. Strategy, I think talk is similar here. Milan, who have been, had a really rough run for a while sandwiched around the World Cup break, but I've been a lot better lately in local play, got a good result, and I think also played early in the match day in Serie A. I want to say they played on Friday even, which is, ideal. I think they actually lost. Well, let's see. I can tell you. So Milan, no, they did not play the Friday match, but they did have a road match at Fiorentina. So after saying such nice things about Germany and how they put Dortmund in a perfect place to succeed, maybe not so much in Serie A and Italy because they were the nightcap on Saturday, whereas Tottenham got to play earlier and their home match. Though, unfortunately, Tottenham did lose to Wolverhampton Wanderers just as AC Milan lost on the road at Fiorentina. Not a great spot for either of these two teams, but AC Milan have a 1-0 lead and are going on the road. So similar situation to Dortmund with a 1-0 lead going on the road. Nightmare scenario if you back AC Milan getting half of a goal. It's 1-0. Tottenham at home, aggregate tied 1-1, and they're just all coasting for extra time. How to avoid that is the question. And honestly, this is a big test. Antonio Conte, who's been off the sideline for a long time, but I think clearly still putting in game plans. He wants to play a conservative brand of football where he's sitting behind the ball, counterattacking. It doesn't work as a big favorite. Tottenham are somehow in Champions League position in the Premier League, despite their play not deserving it, their strategy not deserving it, and really no one playing well because that system just isn't good enough. But it also is it seems like a necessity based on Jose Mourinho using it, Antonio Conte, of course, using it because they don't defend well. And I feel like that puts AC Milan in a good position to sit back, counterattack, and use their pace like Rafael Leao and Brahim Diaz to run as fast as possible, plus Theo Hernandez at left back, though certainly that brings some measure of pause because he can get caught out, and then their defense is a little bit more open if their left back is laying down in the box after exhausting himself on a 100-yard run down the wing. With that said, I do like the counterattacking style because Tottenham don't want the ball. They've shown it playing against teams like Sheffield United in the FA Cup loss last week, not really wanting possession much. They also showed it against Nottingham Forest on the road early in the season and newly promoted. So I feel like we can believe that strategy is going to exist. They're going to sit back and counter despite needing a goal to change this trajectory of this tie. That's a big deal. And I got to say, I don't like that as a favorite. Especially one that needs to potentially even play out of their character and go forward, which is not something they really want to do. Milan, I think, are not really the sit back and defend team, but they did play 3 center backs, or at least a 3-man back line in the first matchup with Tottenham, kept a clean sheet and probably will stick with something similar to that. I do like the idea of Theo Hernandez as a left wing back, as that is better, I think, than a 4-man back line because then they're really exposed, only 2 center backs back there. But it does make then the right wing back, Salamaker, is not really, I think, a great fit, though I think he's played pretty well in the midfield over his career. When I look at Tottenham, I think that they are a team I like to bet against as a favorite, and this is no different scenario here. I am a little bit concerned about if this is 1-0 Tottenham that they go to extra time, but I do think that the under 2.5 is very valuable. It's also very juiced at the moment, potentially falls to 2.25. But I think that's probably my strongest lean in that one because it is a little bit backing both of the defenses in this setup or really just how the team's set up in general and their style or plan to attack or not really attack in both of these teams' cases. Milan perfectly okay with a 1-1 draw, a goalless draw. 1-0 loss, probably not okay with, but going extra time is a lot better than losing in regulation. Tottenham might have to push forward, but I don't think they're going to do it until far too late in the match. Or if they fall behind to an AC Milan goal. That, I think, if AC Milan take a lead, then Tottenham have to come out, and that does make things a lot scarier for a total like an over, or makes the over more likely. But I think then you see Milan even further into their counterattacking style, and that doesn't hurt the under either. So I think under 2.5 is my stronger lean, but I also am not really shying away from that Milan getting half of a goal. We'll see what ends up happening there, but interested in both, which I feel like I'm trying to do a lot more of if I like both dog and total, trying to make some more money and really kind of push the chips in the middle when I'm feeling that way. Last but not least, probably the biggest match of all, at least going to have probably the most eyeballs on it, and that is Paris Saint-Germain visiting Bayern Munchen. I should say it the soccer way and list Bayern Munchen first. So Bayern Munchen and PSG. So what to think about with this one? Going to this leg, we have Bayern with a 1-0 aggregate advantage. It was a pretty good first matchup, but ultimately Kylian Mbappe was just fresh off of injury and came on as a substitute. He's back and was playing pretty well for PSG in Ligue 1 play. Unfortunately, they're out of the cup. Maybe better for their pursuits of Champions League and winning another Ligue 1 title. But they have lost Neymar, and he is not available for months now, it seems. So that's a big issue. Though still having Mbappe and Messi there's no one's going to cry for them. There's been a lot of injuries though recently for PSG. Marquinhos limped off. We have some weird stuff off the pitch about Achraf Hakimi as well being accused of sexual assault. Not sure what the story status is there. But essentially Neymar will be substituted out for Kylian Mbappe. A very good trade, I think, for PSG standards, but they would clearly want all of them on the pitch. The first matchup was won on a goal by Kingsley Coman, former PSG player who did not celebrate, I don't think, in the 53rd minute. And then to make things a little bit interesting at the end, we have Benjamin Pavard with 2 yellow cards getting sent off at the 90th plus 2 minutes, so in stoppage time in the second half. We saw PSG with a win this weekend, not easily, taking a 2-0 lead on Football Club Nantes, and a Nantes side that have been so banged up playing too many competitions for their squad. But Nantes came back from 2-0 down, tied at 2-2, and then lost 4-2, whereas Bayern Munchen had a really tough matchup with Stuttgart on the road, took a 2-0 lead, and then kind of held on for dear life and nearly drew, but hung on for a win and are still at the top of the Bundesliga table on goal differential, I believe. But we saw Matthijs de Ligt score a goal, save a goal off the line, probably his best, and that'll probably be the top for all of his performances as a Bayern Munchen player. Who knows if he'll be there for a long time, but his career at Juventus was not great, put it that way, after coming in, I think, as a highly touted player from Ajax. When I look at this matchup, and I guess I'll get into the spread now, and I did not go through to advanced numbers on the Milan match. So I'll do that at the end of this, I guess, day segment. But Bayern Munchen currently a half a goal favorite at home, very juiced at the moment, potentially climbing to 3/4 of a goal. Over under is 3.25. This is juice to the over. This is a situation where PSG, they want to counterattack. That's their style. That's their strategy. That's their brand. They don't do it as much in Ligue 1. Usually they may when they take a lead, but unfortunately they're not really. A lot of times they're playing such poor and low-funded, low-budget teams in Ligue 1 that they don't necessarily have to do it. I think the question here is, what are PSG going to do? Who's available is another big question, considering all the injuries they've been dealing with. I feel like Marquinhos is a really important piece of their defense. Kimi as well on the wing or fullback, usually playing wing in Liga, but a little different when you're going on the road to Munchen. I do think that Bayern are a scary, scary team. I try not to bet against them because it doesn't really go very well for me. And I was just thinking about this recently. That's even when I do it, it's not a very good watch because it's really not fun. But PSG are really one of the strongest teams in the world. And I would have said that they were a 1B to Manchester City's 1A, if not the best team in the world before the World Cup break. Unfortunately, that then zapped a lot of important players as they had the best player on Brazil, Argentina, and France, two of them World Cup finalists. And I do think that that's impacted the squad quite a bit so far. And it's really hard to tell what they care about. League performances have not been great there. Champions League is the most important, but they have to avenge 1-0 deficit on the road, and that's going to be a big question. I think PSG, the hard thing to talk about is Christophe Galtier, the PSG manager, who I love, who was awesome when he won an upset victory, won Ligue 1 with Lille of all teams, then moved on to Nice for a better project because Lille were going to get rid of all their players, so they didn't have enough money, yet somehow still won Ligue 1. But then he left and took the PSG job as kind of the last resort for PSG, but ultimately kind of stifled a Nice project, which looks like it has just started going again this season with a manager change after they finally got rid of Lucien Favre, who's just a moron, it seems. But PSG need a goal. So if you are going to go on the road and counterattack Bayern, that is a tough way to score, especially because Bayern are going to be literally with their entire back line at the center stripe, basically saying, come at us and come out and play. We can score, we can puncture, we can score on anybody. With that said, I think PSG are one of the scarier teams on the counterattack in the world, if not the scariest. I also feel like they can make goals and can certainly exploit a Bayern Munich defense that is not perfect, to say the least. The total is gigantic at 3.25. That certainly doesn't really correspond or correlate well with an underdog, I got to say, especially not a road underdog. But there could be some fireworks in this one. And that does give me the sense that if Bayern take a lead, that it's certainly not over. Not the total's not over, but also the match is not over. Not ended, terminated, whatever you say. I think PSG, of course, going for that first goal, and that's what they're shooting for. They're used to playing on the front foot and having few defenders back to try to defend. Probably not against this type of quality striker or goal scorer that Bayern Munich do have, but as an underdog player, I'm into PSG for sure. And I think I like that better than the total here because I don't love huge totals, but at the same time, 3.25 is just gigantic for this competition. I think it's okay. Thank you, Siri, for always interjecting. Also gave me a panic attack almost because I don't know where that came from. Anyway, PSG, I like as a half a goal underdog. I think that they can cause problems for Bayern Munich. And I think if they take 1-0 lead, the under looks really good because they're going to sit back and counter and try to get Bayern Munich again via the same either scenario or a different one, but they're going to counterattack for sure. I think that's what PSG want to do and might likely do anyway for most of this match. The problem when you play an under in a Bayern Munich match is they're never going to be conservative and they're going to try to win 7-1. I think Bayern's situation, it's going to be hard for them to break PSG down. PSG are still a really strong team. Sergio Ramos, often forgotten, playing center back for PSG, has forgotten more about football than most defenders that are playing this competition. If Marquinhos is available, I think they start him, especially with 5 substitutions, that if he has to come off after 15 minutes, then maybe they do it. This is the competition they're going for. Danilo Pereira has filled in pretty well as a center back / center defensive midfielder. Interchangeable sort of in a PSG setup in League, but I think that will work pretty well. It has worked pretty well in the past. And just looking over their lineup, I think it's important to have, Kimpembe's been hurt. I'm not sure his status. I think he's the least likely to play, but of course a lot changes and I'm not exactly reading French reports because I don't speak it. So potentially some surprises there, I guess, possibly. But I don't know. I just feel like Bayern have not really looked like the dominant team they've been. Certainly getting Sadio Mane back on the pitch. I'm not sure if he's fit enough to start here, but Certainly that's a scary thought to come off the bench. I do feel like under 3.25 is also, I guess, good enough for me. So unsurprisingly, as I'm trying to make a pick in all these matches, both side and total, like all the dogs, like on all the unders, but then trying to come up with which one I like the best is what you're going to stick around for in the ultimate best bet. Now for the two advanced numbers, I'll start with a PSG number. Currently PSG plus 360 to advance, Bayern München minus 500, 1 to 5 odds. That's pretty gigantic. When I first saw it, PSG were even money to Bayern München minus 130. Then I think the Mbappe news came out with the injury. It jumped to PSG plus 150, settled at plus 145. Bayern to jump to minus 180 and came down to minus 170, then minus 175 where it closed. Market got that one fairly right, I guess, but Kylian Mbappe I still think is the most dynamic, scariest player in all of football. And his injury and absence was a big deal. I think a lot of people were surprised that he came off the bench. I think a lot of, including myself, thought that was just scare tactics, but he's been good. He's the best player in the world. He's the scariest. And it's not often you get him as an underdog, especially when a draw will win Bayern München the tie, get them to advance, yet that draw will be paying you fully on PSG. So that interests me, to say the least. I do think that, I mean, I wonder, based on this matchup and seeing the plus 360 right now, I imagine that there's got to be some PSG money that'll come in before this kicks off. But if not, if that number keeps climbing, I mean, PSG can certainly go into Bayern and get a win. That's asking a lot. I think a draw is more likely. So maybe you want to play the half a goal underdog instead of the plus 360 or potentially higher when this kicks off. But that's my thoughts on that one. Other that I didn't mention yet was the AC Milan Tottenham number. So currently Milan a minus 165 favorite to go through, Tottenham plus 135. And from tracking this at the beginning, Milan were a minus 105, Tottenham minus 125, pretty heavily juiced, obviously. But got as high as Tottenham minus 170 to advance. And Milan ended up closing plus 130 before this match happened, with Tottenham minus 160. And now it's completely flipped the other way, thanks to 1-0 victory on Milan's side. I think Milan certainly should be favored to go through. I understand if people want to back England in the Premier League and their balance sheet versus Serie A, who look very poor at this point. Milan, certainly one of the bigger clubs, not as much in danger, and certainly have Rafael Leao, who I imagine they will sell pretty soon for a pretty penny, to say the least, or lots of pennies. I think I just don't really see it in Tottenham. I feel like they could go out here, and that makes me interested in backing Milan, and also that under, as I said. I think for, I guess, my best bet for Wednesday, I think the strongest lean that I have is to that Milan under. I think that fits pretty well with what I think will happen in that matchup. I don't really think that Tottenham have enough of an offense that I'm scared enough to see them going ahead 2-0 and forcing AC Milan out. I think 1-0 is maybe a very good result that gets Tottenham to extra time. Probably disappointing, I think, and they should be shooting higher, but we've been waiting for that for a very, very long time. So now we've come to, I guess, the ultimate best bet portion of the show. And of course, just say it again, everyone just to know that I'm going to be on Patreon, and trying to get that all set up. It was a little bit more in depth, I thought, setting it up today than I had time for, but do plan to have overnight leans really through all the sports that I'm handicapping, which is right now college basketball, soccer, and I'm trying to get some baseball time in, but I also do need to sleep at some point. But it'll cover, I think it's a $20 membership. It'll cover, and it's really $20 a month. People are paying more than that every day for picks on pregame.com. So I think it'll be more than worth it for everyone. I will still continue to be doing everything on pregame as well, but just letting everyone know that that's the plan. And we'll see how that goes. And if that takes off, if it doesn't, then I don't need to do it. But ultimately we'll see. And I do think that that's going to be a more affordable way to kind of get my thoughts and work that into your handicapping. So without further ado, this is Betting the Pitch, episode number 174, and this is the Champions League edition. My two best bets for Tuesday in Champions League is Borussia Dortmund under 2.5 goals. And on Wednesday is AC Milan under 2.5 goals. And I got to say, my ultimate best bet for this episode will be that AC Milan under 2.5 goals. I just don't think that Tottenham really want to have the ball. We've seen it all season. They've looked really unimpressive to me with their budget, balance sheet, all that sort of stuff, the great names and players that they have. Things have not been going well for them. Certainly some chaos in the manager's office with Antonio Conte's health issues with his gallbladder. But simply put, Tottenham as a favorite, I don't like. They're going to have to push forward and score a goal to try to level this tie. I think that they're not really going to want to do that. Milan are going to sit back, defend. It's going to be hard to get to 3 goals. And so that's my best bet for this episode, Betting the Pitch number 174. Thanks for listening as always, coming in. This is a longer episode, but I figure it's worth it for Champions League and an elimination leg. As always, appreciate the support. The Real _G Warner on Twitter. If you want to get in touch with me, if you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. I'll read a good one or answer some questions from it or something like that on a future podcast if you got it. That'll be it for this episode, and I will come back. I have a special episode on college basketball tournament stuff with AJ Hoffman coming out via pregame tomorrow. And then we'll probably do a Wednesday night edition covering the Europa League, Europa Conference League, if that's even worth talking about. And then get you in a weekend, and I'll go with another weekend stuff or set up for, of course, all the European soccer leagues. And we'll see how far we get with Patreon this week as well. Thanks for all the support. Appreciate all the followers, interactions. Don't mind the negativity if we're losing bets, because there's a lot of them that come out there every week. So of course we're going to lose some, but I appreciate all you hanging in there with me. And I hope to make you all proud as we try to keep building this further and further. So again, for me, the Real _G Warner, thanks so much. And we will talk very soon.